are live. It is Saturday, August 29th, and we're waiting for our thousands of friends to check in for Sip Trip episode 5. Hi Pete, how are you doing? First one I'm seeing in. 1 of 2,000. Ooh, 6,000. Fun stuff. It's always fun watching the numbers go up. I am here with you tonight, and our happy half hour stars, Al and Cheryl. Hi Matthew, nice to see you. Hey Karen, good to see you. Always good to have Karen and Wilson checking in. Pete and Peg. Hi Caitlin Murray Foskey. I noticed you have an extra name on the end of your on your name. How exciting. Hi Virginia Wine Time. And Chris Murray, have you relaxed this week? Okay guys, we are ready. We are in the barrel room, and I present to you Al and Cheryl Kellert.
Are we on now?
Yes,
Yeah, okay.
we're on.
Well, it's great to have you back with us for Sip Trip number 5. And I can't thank you enough for joining us. We're really looking forward to tonight. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. As Amy already mentioned, we're down here in the barrel room. We did have an interesting thing happen this past week. Cheryl and I had an opportunity to go to a movie. And when we got there was a guy laying across 3 chairs. We knew that social distancing was very important, so we called the usher over and asked him if he could get the guy to move. When he asked the guy, all the guy did was moan, and he kept laying there. So the usher told him, he said, look, if you don't move now, I'm going to call the manager. So we brought the manager over. The whole scenario was repeated. Again, you have to move. All he did was moan and kept laying on those 3 chairs. So the manager then said, well, you've given me no option. I've got to call the cops. So he went out and he called the police. The police came in. First thing this policeman did is he said, look, son, you got to get up. You got to move. And again, all he did was moan. So the policeman looked at him and said, so where are you from? And he said, the balcony. Okay, I think we'll stop at that one. Again, tonight is a very special occasion. We're featuring the 2017 Reserve Chardonnay, and we couldn't think of a more appropriate place to actually introduce it. The Reserve for Grey Ghost means that the wine went into new French oak. So this was actually fermented and aged sur lie. That means that the fermentation actually took place in the barrel and then was aged in constant contact with the lees. We then ran it through a secondary fermentation called malolactic. Of course, the primary fermentation is converting the grape sugars to alcohol. The secondary fermentation is to attempt to convert the acids, malic acid, which is a major acid in the grape, to lactic acid, which is a softer dairy acid. And the result is it gives this a very soft, buttery finish. It was extended oak aging, in other words, about 15 months in the new barrels, giving it a hint of vanilla and just making it a great rich wine with your richer seafoods like lobster, salmon, your richer poultry dishes like Cornish hen. We're also very proud of the fact that this took best of class in California in the New World International, where it was competing in a category of $25 to $60 Chardonnays, meaning that we actually outdid the California Chardonnays in their own competition and wines that were priced well over twice our price of wine. So with that, let me pour us a couple of glasses here. As you notice, we're still staying socially distancing and keeping our hands away from our face. So we're going to keep using 2 glasses as much as possible tonight. And I only see 4 glasses tonight. This is a shocker. This is one of Amy's favorite wines, and I'm not seeing another glass. With that, now it's time to enjoy it. So let's take a real quick sip. Wow, that's a good Chardonnay. Okay, moving right along. Now for Cheryl's weekly update. What I'm going to ask her to do is give us a complete synopsis in her comments. Once again, as usual, Cheryl is very succinct in kind of bringing everything together. Now, a quick update on the vineyard. Harvest has officially begun. It began on Monday, the 24th, with the beginning of the picking, obviously the save-off. It was processed on Thursday, went into the barrels on Friday, and we're actually hearing in the background the bubbling away of that save-all. We'll be talking a little bit about that later on. I should mention that the crop was a little bit lighter than we had expected, and there was a huge number of secondaries, meaning the save-all was also hit by the May freeze. There's an outside chance, since this was picked so early, that we may actually end up with a second harvest of save-all, allowing these secondaries to actually ripen. Everything else in the vineyard is moving very quickly. We'll keep you posted, but it looks to us like we're going to be seeing some harvesting coming up in a very, very near future. Now for the feature segmentation, the barrel room. What I'm going to do is start at the beginning and talk more generic, so you can get a little bit of an understanding of what is actually in a barrel room. Then, toward the end, we'll talk a little bit more about the Grey Ghost barrel room. To begin with, there's two types of woods that are used in winemaking. Redwood, which is neutral, and white oak, and that's what most barrels are made of. White oak doesn't necessarily mean everything is going to taste the same. It adds complexity and gives the wine the ability to age. Now, barrel sources come from three dominant areas. Of course, we all know that French barrels and French oak is a very prominent fixture in a wine barrel room. And most of the French barrels are identified by the location they were harvested or the forest that they were picked in. U.S., do I have a question?
No, I'm going to need you to speak up a little bit. Yeah, let me
Okay,
have you speak up, and maybe with the echo, talk slightly slower, just a little more distinctly.
Okay, very good point. Now, the U.S. barrels come primarily from the Ozark area, which means it's a warmer climate, and therefore they are going to be a little more open-grained. Finally, we are getting barrels coming out of Hungary. This is a cooler climate, and as a result, a much tighter grained wood. Barrel sizes also vary. The larger the barrel, the more reduced surface area per volume, which means that as the barrel gets larger, less oak is going to be absorbed by the wine that's on the inside. It's just the opposite with smaller barrels. You'll actually pick up more oak character. The standard barrel size is about 60 gallons, or 225 to 228 liters. A standard barrel normally produces about 25 cases, or 300 bottles per barrel. So it does give you some indication of how much wine is in a barrel. Now, why use barrels? What's the purpose of them? Well, quite frankly, a major asset is it adds flavors and complexity to a wine. It can add smokiness, vanillas, it can soften the tannins, and basically give us a much more rounded, finished wine. This is especially important in reds. When a red is first made, the tannins are extremely harsh. So the aging process actually gives us the ability to soften those tannins and give us a much better mouthfeel with regards to the wine. Chardonnays going into oak, the oak adds complexity. So it adds more depth and more character to the wine and gives you a much greater number of flavors and experiences than you would get if the wine was strictly done in stainless steel. Finally, it allows the wine to breathe. A barrel actually loses about a bottle of wine every 30 to 60 days through evaporation or through osmosis. This is often called the angel's share. You do have to love the French for coming up with romantic names for the different problems we have in a wine business. For that reason, these barrels have to be topped off on a regular basis. And we'll talk a little bit more about topping off momentarily. A little bit about the industry. For those of you who are Cheryl and my age, you'll probably remember that back in the 70s, wines that were coming out of California were very golden, especially the Chardonnays. Back then, the industry was very young, and the barrels that were being used were basically retired whiskey barrels. By the 80s, the wine industry had matured, and now barrel companies were actually making wine specifically designed for the wine industry. As a result, more barrels now enter the wine industry than in the hard liquor or whiskey barrels. And there's a significant difference in them. The life expectancy of a barrel is normally about 5 to 6 years. If maintained and if kept clean, these barrels can be used much longer than that for storage of wine, but it's basically a neutral container, but it has to be kept clean. You have to keep in mind wood is very porous and very susceptible to bacteria. If the barrel is not sanitized and not kept clean, one of the most dreaded experiences a winemaker can have is the influx of Brettanomyces in the barrel room. This is what gives a wine its Band-Aid medicinal characteristic, and once you get it, it's extremely difficult to ever get rid of it without actually eliminating all the barrels and starting from scratch. Now, do I have any questions at all prior to talking a little bit about the Grey Ghost barrel room?
Yes, and I apologize. I think the distance we were away might have impacted the beginning part of the program. Chris Murray asked, does Al ever use French oak for the Reserve Chardonnay? So maybe you just want a quick recap on tonight's wine.
Chris, good question. Sorry, yes, it is all new French oak. Anytime we put the word reserve on a label, for this winery for Grey Ghost, it means that the wine was fermented and or aged in new French oak. And quite frankly, with the exception of the Seyval, everything in the barrel room is now French oak.
Now I have a question.
Yes.
Are wine barrels charred the way whiskey barrels are?
No. In fact, we're going to be touching on that in a moment, but let me fill you in. There's quite a difference between a whiskey barrel, which is charred, and a wine barrel, which is toasted. And the difference is a wine barrel, when we toast, is merely caramelizing the oak sugars in the barrel. If you looked inside our barrels before they're filled, you can actually see the grain of the wood. If you look inside a whiskey barrel, all you're going to see is charred wood. Now, where we're located is actually in the barrel room, which is underground. We're sitting under 12 inches of concrete, so this area is actually duplicating a cave. The benefit of this is we have a cool, dark, consistent temperature, a perfect climate for aging wine. The one segment that we do have to control is humidity. During the summer, the humidity down here does increase, so we have to use dehumidifiers to keep the mold from attacking the barrels. During the winter, when it's very dry, these barrels will actually be sprayed with water periodically to keep them moist and also minimize the evaporation. A little bit about the barrels we use. When Cheryl and I first got started, we used two types of barrels, American oak and French oak. The American oak was used for all of our reds, with the exception of the Reserve Cabernet Sauvignon. The French oak was used for our Chardonnays, our Seyvals, and also the Reserve Cabernet. Currently, we've changed a little bit. About 15 years ago, we made the decision that the American oak was actually overpowering the wine. And it was so open-grained that it was being absorbed very, very rapidly into the wine. So we made the decision to shift 100% to French oak. with one notable exception, and that's the save-all. We wanted to produce a save-all that would feature the fruit, but also give the wine the ability to breathe while it's aging. So to some extent, it's made a little bit like Robert Mondavi's early Fume Blanc, in which it was a Sauvignon Blanc aged in oak. So that's currently the way we're actually working in the barrel room. Do I have a question?
Yes, Fran Pryluck from the budding metropolis of Amesville is asking, what is the best humidity percentage in the barrel room?
We're running it at about 60% humidity. So if you come down into the barrel room, it feels very cool, very dry, and we're constantly pulling the moisture out so we don't run the risk of problems within the barrel room. Now, getting back to the sources of our wood, of course, there's really no definition of where the Hungarian oak comes from, at least not that I'm aware of. So we just basically class it Hungarian oak. With regards to the French barrels, we use 3 of the 5 forests, the Allier, the Nevers, and the Vosges. Each one of these barrels are designed for a specific wine, which is added to the complexity of all of our wines. So those are the 3 forests that we really concentrate on. Now, what do we use the barrels for? Well, first place, fermentation, and that's the Chardonnay and Seyval. We're very fortunate to be sitting right next to a barrel that's in the process of fermenting. And what I'm going to do is have Amy move the camera, and we're going to take a quick look at the airlock that's actually bubbling away in the Seyval. If you watch, you're going to see bubbles coming up any second now, and this is CO2, carbon dioxide, that's actually escaping from the barrel as the fermentation takes place. This is a byproduct of fermentation. The alcohol is, of course, the other. Now, come on, you can do it. You can do it. Here we go. We're just going to tap it to get it started. There we go. So what we've actually done is developed a neutral bath over the wine by allowing the CO2 to dissipate and fill that barrel head with CO2 gas. Now, to let you see what the actual airlock looks like, we've pulled one out. The bung is going to fit inside the hole of the barrel very, very tightly. The water level is set halfway up so that as the CO2 is attempting to escape, it bubbles through the water, keeping it perfect environment so that air cannot get back into the barrel. Once fermentation is completed, we start the aging process. We remove that airlock and now replace it with a solid bung. The bung is polyurethane, very pliable, and therefore fits extremely tightly in the barrel, prohibiting any air to get into that barrel while it's aging. Finally, we deal with malolactic, and as we talked earlier, there's only 2 wines that go through malolactic in the barrel room. One is the Reserve Chardonnay, which we're enjoying tonight, and the other one is our Reserve Cabernet, the only red that's run through malolactic. And of course, that's a secondary fermentation designed to soften the acids and give it just a beautiful mouthfeel. I think I'm going to try it again. Yes.
Lisa Carey is asking, how much CO2 gets in the rim?
Lisa, when we're running full speed, which means I've got all of the Seyval and Chardonnay bubbling away, this room will be totally filled with CO2. So when I come down to check the barrels, what you don't see is an escape door at the back of the building. I'll make a mad dash to that, pop that barrel or that door open, allowing the CO2, which is heavier than air, to dissipate out that back and then allow me to come back into the barrel room. If you didn't do this, you wouldn't be seeing me here today. So that's a very good question, and yes, it does fill the room. Now, what happens during aging? Well, a red basically is softening the tannins. A red comes down as a finished wine. Therefore, it's put into the barrel. We immediately seal the barrel and allow nature to have at it with regards to the oak. However, the Chardonnay and the Seyval are a whole different matter. They're fermented, and once fermentation is completed, which is called fermenting sur lie, the lees, or the dead yeast cells, now fall to the base of the barrel and will just lay there. This means that about once a week or once every other week, these barrels have to be stirred. If you don't stir, what basically happens is the yeast cells begin to decompose or break down, and it will give the wine a very funky character. Now, I thought what would be kind of a fun experiment to do, since these barrels are going to be stirred on Monday, is we're going to look at one of the barrels with Chardonnay in it. We're going to pull a sample, let you see what the sample looks like prior to stirring, and then we're going to pull a sample and let you see what it looks like after stirring. At the same token, Cheryl is going to have in her hand the finished wine from 2017, and you'll see the incredible sparkling clarity that's the result of working with that wine right on through to the end. So we're going to go and get ourselves into position right now.
I'm going to flash up while they are moving how you can order Grey Ghost wine. And then, Al, I would like you to be thinking about how often do you actually taste a barrel? A question from Jane Hunt. So Al and Cheryl are getting in position.
The barrel we're going to sample is going to be a 2019 Reserve Chardonnay.
That's a 2019 Reserve Chardonnay, sorry.
Now, if all is right, you're going to hear the vacuum on this barrel as I open it. I hope you all heard that. Now what we're going to do is pull a sample of that wine prior to it being stirred. What I'm using is called a thief. It allows us to have the wine fill it. Once that the airlock is closed, we can take it out of the barrel.
I would also remind our viewers in March, this is the experience you have at a barrel tasting, tasting directly from the barrel.
Now I'm going to have Cheryl hold you her two glasses up, and you can see the little bit of haze that we have in the one that has been pulled from the sample versus the barrel, the one that is crystal clear. Now we're going to stir the barrel. We take a stainless steel rod that has a base that's the exact curvature of the French oak barrel. It's going to be inserted into the barrel, and then the barrel is stirred. What basically we're doing right now is we're mixing the leaves that have fallen to the base of the barrel into the finished wine. And very shortly you'll see what happens when we pull it out. Now we're going to hold all three glasses up. And in fact, what we're going to do is like this. And you can see how the yeast has now been mixed in so that it'll add character to the wine. Prior to that, it was relatively clear. And of course, the finished wine is crystal clear. You know, just for the heck of it, Cheryl, I would highly recommend you joining us at the barrel tasting. This is really exciting. Okay. Now the other thing I hope you noticed is when I pulled the bung out, I did not put it face down on the barrel. It was put upside down. You never want to contaminate the wine with the outside that's been touched by air or anything else. Now we can put it back in and we'll know that that bung is perfectly clean going back into the barrel.
So before we continue on, Al, would you address Jane Hunt's question, how often do you actually taste a barrel?
Every Chardonnay barrel is opened at least once a week. All of them are smelled, random ones are tasted. So basically a barrel, there will be some barrels that are sampled every week. On the red side, the barrels are opened about once a month. Again, smell is number one, random tasting is the second item. And the idea here is you want to make sure that you're not over oaking, and you also want to make sure that the tannins are indeed softening. Now, the other element, of course, is aging of the wines, as I just mentioned, and for us, it ranges anywhere from 5 months for a Seyval to as long as up to 3 years for a Reserve Chardonnay. So depending on what wine is being made will dictate how long it stays in the barrel. Finally, maintenance of the barrels. When a barrel is empty, it has to be washed immediately. And the washing unit that we use actually allows the barrel to be placed over the opening under high pressure water, extremely hot. The top will be spinning, and when it spins, it's actually rinsing the entire barrel out. Immediately following that, if that barrel is going to be used within the next 30 to 60 days, we burn sulfur in it. If it's going to last longer than that without being refilled, it's then filled with a citric sulfur solution, which does not strip the barrel of any flavor, but protects it against any bacteria. Again, keeping in mind, wood is porous. You have to keep that barrel clean. The current status right now in the barrel room is we have the Seyval, which you saw bubbling away with the airlock, in the process of aging. The other barrels that have wine in them are sealed with the plastic, with the polyurethane bung. And then there are a number of barrels down here that are empty, which are being held with the sulfur citric solution until harvest, and when we can start filling them. Now, a lot of questions have come up. How do we get that barrel empty? We use a special siphoning rod, which I'll bring over for you. The siphoning rod is actually designed to go into the barrel. You'll notice there's basically a stainless steel rod at the end of it, which keeps it above the base of the wine. Then, using a special siphoning pump, the wine is drawn out of the barrel and moved up to stainless steel. You'll notice, or to the stainless steel tanks for blending. You notice everything is stainless steel, everything is sanitized, and it does give us the ability to lock that rod down in order to move it from barrel to barrel. That's the last phase of the barrel. Amy, do we have any further questions?
Fran is wondering if you have any volunteers for the tasting part of the...
Fran, I'm very fortunate to have two wonderful women down here with me right now that are more than happy to jump in, but I'll put your name on the list. Any other questions that we've got?
No, I think we're good right now.
Well, just as a closer, I guess you're all, yes.
Did we address these big containers down here on the floor?
No, thank you very much. Anytime a barrel has to be topped off, we have to fill it with the wine that was actually in that barrel. So what we have in front of us here are two carboys. One is a carboy of Chardonnay coming from the 2019 vintage, which is used to top off the reserve barrels. And then the red is from the Cabernet Sauvignon 2019, which we use to top off the Cabernet barrels. We also have Merlot, Malbec, Petit Verdot, and Cabernet Franc down here, so that any barrel that has a specific wine will be topped off with that wine. But very good, thank you, Amy. And you'll also notice too, these carboys are filled to the very, very top to minimize any air contact that could possibly come into the contact with those wines. Well, in closing, the Shenandoah Park is now open, and I hope you all have a chance to get up to it when you're on your way out here to visit us. Cheryl and I had a chance to go not too long ago and talk to one of the park rangers. He informed us that the bears are very active right now, especially the black bears. They are very shy of human beings. His recommendation was don't surprise them. Wear a little bell if you can on your backpack or somewhere on your body so that he will hear you and will move on. They've also detected grizzly bears now in the park, and these are very dangerous and very anti-human. And he said, if for any reason you see the grizzly bear droppings, it's important to get away from that area as quick as possible. Well, naturally, we were curious, and we said, well, how do you know they're grizzly bear droppings? And he said, well, normally grizzly bear droppings have a lot of little small bells in them. With that, again, thank you so very much for joining us. I hope you had a wonderful week, and we look forward to seeing you next week.
Thank you for joining us. Tune in next week as we feature another brand new release, the 2019 Adieu. Today's Happy Half Hour has been brought to you by Grey Ghost Vineyards. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. We really love seeing you.